What's cracking, everybody? It's James Coe, aka the Sleeper King, and we are here for week number 3. I got 10 sleepers plus a couple of streaming defenses for y'all this week. If you don't know who I am an award-winning, long-time fantasy football analyst. I've worked at NFL Network, I've worked at DirecTV, Red Zone, I've worked at Amazon Prime Sports, and a lot of different places. If y'all want to follow along, feel free. All right, let's talk about 3 quarterbacks I really like. Caleb Williams has been very up and down, but from a production standpoint, he's actually been pretty good. This week, he's taken on the Dallas Cowboys, the exact same defense that just gave up 450 yards to a washed-up Russell Wilson. To say they have some issues on the back end would be a massive understatement. Dallas was dead last in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks last year. They're the 3rd worst fantasy defense against quarterbacks this year. I am also looking at Sam Darnold taking on the New Orleans Saints. The Saints have given up the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this year, but what has me really intrigued is this stat. The fact that the Saints are posting the 2nd lowest quarterback pressure rate means good to great things for Sam Darnold. All quarterbacks are better in a clean pocket, but Sam Darnold especially plays much better under a clean pocket than when he's under pressure. Plus, Darnold, the former USC Trojan, is coming off a very strong performance there in week number 2, throwing for nearly 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. I have Drake Maye as a sleeper against the Steelers. On paper, the Steelers have, again, one of the best defenses in the NFL. I mean, shoot, anytime you're talking about TJ Watt up front and Jalen Ramsey on the back end, it's going to be awfully hard for you to be a bad defense. Okay, that being said, I just got done talking about Sam Darnold. Who's the defense that he saw in week number 2? It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Through 2 weeks, the Steelers have given up the 5th most fantasy points to the quarterback position, and they are bottom 10 in a number of key metrics. Bottom 10 in sacks, bottom 10 in pass yards allowed, bottom 10 in completion percentage allowed, and they're giving up big plays too. They're bottom 10 in yards per attempt allowed. Drake Maye, meanwhile, coming off of one of his best games as a pro. 3 total touchdowns, and what also has me intrigued, he ran for 31 yards. That's not an insignificant amount. Drake Maye's got some wheels. This is the last week that we can actually call Javonte Williams a sleeper, but we're going to do it anyways as he's taking on the Chicago Bears. Man, Chicago is getting hammered on the ground. They've allowed the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs, and my goodness, the 123 rush yards per game that they have allowed, that ranks as the 3rd worst in the NFL. And let's be real, the Bears are getting absolutely mauled up front. According to Next Gen Stats, the Bears are allowing 2.62 yards before contact to opposing running backs. That ranks dead last in the NFL by a pretty significant margin. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this stat, what this means is that the Bears are essentially giving up 2.6 yards per carry to opposing running backs before the running back even sees a defender making a tackle attempt. Again, keep in mind, 2.6 yards before contact. League average is 0.7 yards. And man, Javonte has looked, I mean, let's be real, he's looked pretty good, man. He's playing over 70% of the snaps too. He's down there almost every single snap. Javonte, to me, an absolute must start. This one's also a little bit of a no-brainer, but I want to give people more confidence in starting Jordan Mason against Cincinnati. Obviously, with Aaron Jones on IR, Jordan Mason now becomes practically a must start in nearly every format. I mean, maybe if you're in a shallow 10-team league or your team is already stacked at running back, you don't need to play Jordan Mason. But for us commoners, for us regular folk, we got to play Jordan Mason every week. The Bengals are allowing 4.14 yards after contact per carry to opposing running backs. That's the 5th worst mark in the NFL. They're also giving up a ton of receptions and touchdowns, and overall, the Bengals have allowed the 2nd most fantasy points per game to the running back position. It should be noted that, again, they've only played 2 games, and they've already allowed 3 different running backs to post double-digit PPR points. We're back at it with New England taking on Pittsburgh. I really like Rhamondre Stevenson against the Steelers as well. Surprisingly, the Steelers have allowed the 2nd most rush yards to opposing running backs. They're also getting gashed up front and through the middle. The Steelers are allowing 5 yards per carry to opposing running backs between the tackles. That ranks as the 7th worst in the NFL, and that's an important stat for New England because the Patriots' run scheme really likes to lean on between the tackles runs. And obviously, Rhamondre is coming off of a 21-point PPR explosion game last week. I am very quiet quietly, maybe tepidly, endorsing Isiah Pacheco with a bounce-back week against the Giants. Last year, the Giants gave up the 5th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. This year, they are dead last. Javonte Williams obviously tagged them for a 25 spot last week, and rookie Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt rushed for 82 yards and scored a touchdown against this same Giants D. The 5.7 yards per carry allowed, that is the 2nd worst mark in the NFL, and the G-men are 3rd worst in explosive run rate allowed. Hey, and not for nothing, there was a significant uptick in play time. 48% snap share in week 1, 60% snap share in week 2. Let's talk about Wan'Dale Robinson taking on the Chiefs. Robinson obviously had a huge explosion game last week, 142 yards and a touchdown on 8 receptions, good for 28.2 PPR points. But remember, he also saw pretty good volume there in week number 1 with 8 targets, resulting in 6 receptions for 55 yards, a double-digit PPR day. Meanwhile, the Chiefs gave up a lot of production to the slot last year, and that trend has continued this year. In 2024, the Kansas City Chiefs gave up the 2nd most fantasy points per game to receivers lined up inside. Through 2 games this year, they've allowed the 3rd most fantasy points, including the 2nd most receptions and the 4th most yards. Very quietly, Josh Downs actually led the Colts in targets last week. 8 targets, 6 grabs, 51 yards. It's not a huge line, but the matchup is right. The Titans have given up the 4th most receptions, and they're dead last in yards allowed to receivers in the slot. And 2 very important injuries to watch for in Indianapolis. One being to Josh Downs himself, the other, Tyler Warren. Both missed practice on Wednesday. Warren with a toe, Josh Downs with an ankle. If Downs is healthy and Warren is not, that could be a huge production lift for Josh Downs. My last wide receiver is Dontayvion Wicks. When Jaden Reed went out, Dontayvion Wicks took over that slot position for Green Bay. And man, I don't know about you, but he was being targeted at a pretty high rate. There is wide open opportunity for Dontayvion Wicks to show that last year was more of a fluke than not. Hey, and listen, this is not a slot-only player, which I love. 65% of his snaps this year have been on the inside. So again, he's the primary slot man for the Packers, but he has played outside on 35%. That's pretty big. Exactly half of his receptions have come while lined up outside versus inside. And the reason this is important is Dontayvion Wicks can legitimately play out there on 2 receiver sets. That's hugely important for Green Bay. Okay, 2 streaming defenses. Seattle taking on New Orleans, and the Falcons taking on the Panthers. The Seahawks are playing at home, that's important. And Mike McDonald has this defense humming pretty well. They've got 4 interceptions through 2 games. That's tied for the 2nd most in the NFL. As a result, man, they've scored the 5th most fantasy points among all fantasy defenses. And something to watch for in regards to the Saints. They've got 2 starting offensive linemen who missed practice on Wednesday. I don't know if the injuries are serious enough to keep either or both out of the game on Sunday, but it is something to monitor. I just said the Seahawks scored the 5th most fantasy points among all defenses. You know who's number 1? Surprisingly, it's the Atlanta Falcons. And they have been low-key tough against opposing quarterbacks. They have the 5th most sacks, and they've allowed the 2nd fewest pass yards through 2 games. Oh, by the way, they lead the league in completion percentage allowed. And again, we talked about O-line injuries. Man, the Panthers are banged up. They just put 2 starting offensive linemen on IR this week. I think Bryce Young is going to be under heavy pressure. To me, the Atlanta Falcons are one of the strongest streaming defensive plays that you can make. Again, if you appreciate the info, man, hit us with a like and subscribe. We'll see you next week.